I could see your face. Our viewers couldn't see it, and I could see all your thought bubbles. I want to hear all of them.
Oh, yeah, I have quite a few, Nicole. First of all, I am so impressed when I hear evidence of Mark Meadows saying things that pretty dramatically undercut Donald Trump's claims regarding the classified documents, like he telepathically declassified them with his mind, like they were automatically declassified when he took them from the White House. When you have his own chief of staff, a fellow Republican, Mark Meadows, completely, eviscerate those claims. You also have Mike Pence in his own mealy-mouthed way going a long way to also undercut those claims. Once these cases are in trial, Nicole, Donald Trump will be convicted by a chorus of Republican voices. I mean, I think back to the January 6th House Select Committee. I think there was nary a Democrat that we saw testify. So once these cases are in trial proper, I do maintain it's going to kind of be like shooting fish in a barrel. Donald Trump will not have a compelling defense. It also takes me back to when I was prosecuting gang cases. If I was trying gang number 1 and I would call witnesses from gang number 2, a rival gang, to testify against gang number 1, there was obviously a built-in line of cross-examination for bias, for prejudice, because, of course, you're sponsoring the testimony of the enemies of the defendant. It doesn't mean they're lying, but it puts their credibility instantly in question. Well, Donald Trump's own gang members from the GOP are going to be the ones presenting the most sharply incriminating information against Donald Trump. So, these cases are quite strong. The other thing that I'm really interested to figure out, because it's a stone cold mystery right now, what is Mark Meadows' status? Because once we saw that he was neither an indicted defendant in the D.C. indictment that was handed down, nor was he one of those 6 unnamed co-conspirators, but I think we know who 5 of the 6 are, and none of them are Mark Meadows. That led to the reasonable inference, indeed the strong inference, that Meadows is cooperating. That seems to be bolstered and supported by all of the incriminating things that have come to our attention one way or another, courtesy of Mark Meadows. And yet then he ends up a RICO defendant indicted in Georgia. So ordinarily, I can tell you, when I was a prosecutor in D.C. and I was investigating or prosecuting somebody who had criminal liability in other jurisdictions, which was not that unusual. People may have been committing crimes, across the district line in Prince George's or Montgomery County, or across the river in Arlington and Alexandria in Virginia. We, the prosecutors in the various jurisdictions, would communicate early and often, and we'd work very hard to come up with what we call a global plea agreement, because that's the cleanest and tidiest way to deal with somebody who will become a cooperating witness. Have all of the jurisdictions get together and deal with all of the criminal exposure that a particular defendant who aspires to be a cooperating witness might have. Well, that doesn't seem to be the way it has played out thus far with respect to Mark Meadows. So I am keenly interested to see how Mark Meadows ends up in this sad saga. Will he be a straight-up cooperating witness who is prepared to take responsibility for all of his own crimes and misconduct, and then is willing to testify truthfully about the crimes of others? But at this moment, I think it's an open question what his status ultimately will be.
Yeah, I mean, David, his status is a mystery. My best guess is his status is a client of George Terwilliger. That's the only reason it's a mystery, because his conduct is so clear from Cassidy Hutchinson's testimony. I mean, the gang analogy is interesting because Meadows is the one that makes clear that when it came to gangs, Trump stood with the insurrectionists on the day of January 6th. And he said to his own lawyers, he thinks Mike deserves it. That's the White House chief of staff who thinks that Mike deserves it. It was being hung.
Yeah, Nicole, look, I think Glenn's question is a very good one. And I'm curious if the vice is just not tight enough yet on Mark Meadows, because I served with Mark Meadows. I know Mark Meadows, and I believe today that Mark Meadows has sung like a canary already to Jack Smith. And I say that because he is somebody that holds himself out with a bit of a compass. Now, that requires you to skip past the fact that he went to work for Donald Trump, which holds all these moral questions in and of itself. But he is somebody who considers himself to have a certain amount of compass. And I also just don't think he's somebody that wants to go to prison for Donald Trump. I think he's in that category of people who say, wait, if my personal jeopardy, my personal freedom are on the line, I'm happy to talk about Donald Trump. And so with that in mind, you know, what I am curious about is this move by Mark Meadows to try to move the Georgia matter to federal court avoids the substantive matter, avoids the substantive question. It raises this federal question if he can get out in federal court without addressing the hard questions in Georgia. And I actually think that's consistent with him having cooperated with Jack Smith. I guess I'd have a question a bit for Glenn or John's reporting. Could Jack Smith actually support that removal from state court to federal court? Because at the end of the day, what I truly, truly believe about Mark Meadows is he's cooperating and he's going to give up the president.
John Carl.
Well, I don't know about supporting the effort to move the case in Georgia, but I do know this. Donald Trump fought mightily to try to keep Mark Meadows from testifying. He invoked executive privilege. They went to court to try to keep him from testifying, and ultimately they failed, which is why Meadows at least initially agreed to talk to the special counsel under subpoena. So I don't know. I mean, the big question that both of you are raising is there a cooperation agreement? Is there something more? But what we can see from this reporting we've done at ABC is that at the very least, Meadows has been speaking to investigators of the special counsel's office, and he has been, at least in the classified documents case, answering questions with apparent candor.
While I have all of you, John Carl, you'll learn what David and Glenn already know. You can check out, but you can never leave Deadline White House. There's some news that's broken in the last hour. Special counsel Jack Smith's team is firing back at a request from the ex-president to delay the federal trial related to his effort to overturn his defeat in 2020 until the year 2026. In a court filing, investigators for special counsel Jack Smith wrote this, quote, in service of the proposed trial date in 2026 that would deny the public its right to a speedy trial, the defendant cites inappropriate statistics in cases, overstates the amount of new and non-duplicative discovery, and exaggerates the challenge of reviewing it effectively. Neither the discovery nor any other factor raised by the defense impedes a fair trial on the schedule proposed by the government. Jack Smith's team has previously proposed beginning jury selection in December with a proposed trial date in January 2024. Glenn, your thoughts? It's pithy. It doesn't seem impatient, but it seems quite direct.
I love Jack Smith's straightforward, no-nonsense court filings. I can't tell you, Nicole, how many times, and I've probably been guilty of this myself, my brother across the bar seems to misapprehend the subtleties. No, none of that with Jack Smith. He calls it the way he sees it. And I think the defense team, Donald Trump's defense team, has made his job a little easier in that regard, because I don't think you're engaged in legitimate lawyering when you come back with a counter proposal saying, let's kick this case 2.5 to 3 years down the road. I don't think that's a straight-faced request. It makes Donald Trump's defense lawyers sound more like assistant campaign managers. And I think it might actually boomerang on them and have the effect of Judge Chutkan setting a far earlier trial date than a later trial date. So I don't think these tactics are going to play well either with Jack Smith or Judge Chutkan.